I think on the item on the agenda, I know we did some introduction of maybe the welcome of Mrs. Adesua of Basohan, who is virtually my producer and somebody who is organizing this. Welcome, Mrs. Obasohan.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone that is present here today. Thank you and welcome. Good morning, folks. Today marks ENAW Women's 12th year anniversary and 29th year for the main body. And this is Edo Diaspora Women 2nd year in existence. Routinely, Labor Day weekend is a day when we come together as Edo people in North America to celebrate our uniqueness as a people, our rich and vibrant culture. Over the years, we have reached out to many experts in different fields to bless us with information that is pertinent to our existence. This year is no different, and we are fortunate enough to be hearing from the legal experts from Edo State. We are a humanitarian organization that seeks to render support to the needy in Edo State. We support good governance and seek to empower the girl child in our dear state. This program supports our stated objectives as it will examine some harmful cultural practices to women, the male child preference, etc. This is clearly for information transfer and knowledge is power. We are very appreciative of Egobamie and Egobamie for taking the time out to educate us on a topic that is very dear to us as a people. Without taking much of your time, I will ask that we delve into the reason why we are here. And once again, I thank everyone that has taken time out of their various busy schedules in North America, in Nigeria, and wherever you may be connecting from to be a part of this awesome event. My name is Adesua Amoruyo Basoha. I remain your humble servant leader. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Obasoha. And again, you've heard it. She wants us to dive straight to the reason why we're here. I don't know if we can do proper intro of Mr. Osaro Egobamie. If somebody already did, please, let's go into it. And then we just...
Yes, doing that.
All right.
Okay.
Yasu, please bring in my brother, and he's got about a 30, 40 minutes monologue and speech to just to bring all of us to date legally, and then we will and then we'll go to dive into questions and questions and answers. But also just to let you know, the technical difficulty has been resolved. So if you want to please share it, continue to share it. I want to thank Kelly on the other side for working on it while we're doing this. So please, Mrs. Obiasu, take it away.
Osaro Egobamie San is one of the founding partners of Birchstone and Grace, LP. Birchstone and Grace is a full-service commercial law firm. Competence in power, energy, and infrastructure, banking and finance, dispute resolution, capital markets, ICT law, and corporate and commercial law. He is the managing partner of the firm and leads his dispute resolution group with emphasis in crude disputes. He also leads the banking and finance group. Osaro was admitted to practice in England and Wales in 1989 and in Nigeria in 1991. He was conferred with the prestigious rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria in 2008. In recognition of his diligence, passion, and contribution to the legal profession, Osaro San is the eldest son of my uncle, late Sir Chief Dr. Alfred Ogogo Egobamie, both alumni of the Lincoln Inn. Osaro also took an elective in law of trusts at the Lincoln's Inn and has since been engaged in establishing a cross-border trusts. At the same time, Being proud of his heritage, he is assisting in creating simple estate plan for many of his father's clients. Osaro Egobamie is currently the administrator of his late father's estate, who has seen the pros and cons of administration of estates. Hence, he will be talking to us not only from a legal and theoretical perspective, but also from his personal experience from acting as an administrator of his dad's estate, as well as his other practical experience from his law practice. Osaro is the vice chairman of the Convention on Business Integrity, trust and integrity being the cornerstone for the establishment of a living or testamentary trust. Osaro takes every available opportunity to teach law and legal principles to young legal talents and is regularly at the Nigerian Law School delivering lectures to the students. I want to hereby welcome San Osaro Egobamie to the floor.
Mrs. Obiaso, thank you for that elaborate introduction. I at one point was not sure if that pertains to me, but let me break it down further. My rendition, my speech is really not so much going to be legal, even though I have the legal background. I am going to speak from a personal experience and hopefully share my situation, and which will perhaps assist most of you in the diaspora. There are three reasons why I can connect with you very easily. I was born in the UK and I came back to Nigeria as a young lad. I went to primary school. I joined the primary school in Benin, and then I went to Immaculate Conception College. I went to boarding school. At the age of 15, I went back to England. And then I, of course, did my A-levels and then did my university. And then I was called to the bar in England. I did not want to come back home. And I'm sure a lot of you will have children who have those instincts at the moment. I didn't want to come back home, but my father would have none of it. Eventually, we had some understanding that I should come back and undertake the law school and then go back to England. I came back in 1990, did the law school and qualified in 91, and I'm still in Nigeria, and happily so. And I would share some of the things that make me quite happy being here. The second reason why I think I'm perhaps I have the privilege to speak to you, and I thank Mrs. Adesuwa Obaswa for giving me the privilege, is that I am the first son of my father. But that was also contested. He died last year. Somebody came in and said he was the first son. My father cracks a joke that if you can build a home in Benin, you would have people who will come and say they are the first child, regardless of what you do. But he said he's never seen anyone who was in a rented apartment, hadn't paid his rent, and he was being buried, and anyone came up and said they were his first child. So I'll talk about that during the course of my speech. And then finally, I have 3 girls and a boy. So I know some of the issues that the girl child will face, especially from a very strong Benin culture. But there are ways in which we can circumvent some of those difficulties, and I will talk about it during the course of my speech. So the way in which I want to deal with this is to put it in 4 compartments. The first compartment, I will share with you a short documentary, 2-3 minutes. This was what we played at the anniversary of my father's death. I had a lot of respect for my father, so do my 3 brothers, my 2 other brothers, I beg your pardon. We consider him to be a real leader. When I play that documentary, you'll understand what it means to say there's inheritance and legacy. I will talk about that when I finish on the documentary. The second compartment will deal with why it is important, especially in a place where there's so much complexity about inheritance, to have an estate plan. And then I will talk about this house is not for sale, something that has generated a lot of interest. We coined that phrase during my father's first anniversary. And lastly, I will make some recommendations of various ways in which you can avoid the main complexities that arise from inheritance in Benin. And then I'll probably talk about some of the businesses that relate to inheritance. Having a beautiful cemetery in Benin, we don't have one now. Having a beautiful nursing home in Benin, we don't have one now. Having a website that boards on people who provide services, services that you're concerned about. Many of you will send money home and the money will not achieve its objective because you're sending it to the wrong people. I will talk about that. There is a level of integrity that is exhibited here, which a lot of people do not know about. And the diaspora in general have a misconception about the level of integrity. There are people who exhibit some level of integrity here. So let me start by sharing the documentary with you, and then I'll come back and speak, just about 3 minutes.
The Benin Kingdom of the South region of Nigeria boasts of the historic cultural heritage of the various dynasties that make up the kingdom. It flourished from the 13th to the 19th century as a cosmopolitan city with a trade network dating back to the contact with the Portuguese for mutual commercial benefits. The Beninese were known for their expertise in bronze casting. The dense rainforest and arable, fertile land was an added advantage for agriculture. Benin soon became a destination point for Europe and industrialized nations of the world. This exposure to the Western world rubbed off to a large extent on the cultural patterns of the Beninese. For example, the system of primogeniture practiced in the United Kingdom is one of things with the Beninese. When a Benin man dies, his eldest surviving son steps into his father's shoes as a patriarch of the family. He is expected to keep up with his father's legacies and to ensure that his siblings are adequately catered for until they attain the age of majority. He holds his father's estate in trust for himself and on behalf of his siblings. As noble as the customary practice of succession may appear, it is fraught with difficulties. From available statistics, a vast majority of cases pending at various tiers of courts and states are inheritance related. An informal way for the disputing parties to preserve their interests in the properties left behind by their parents or forebears is to place the inscription, "This house is not for sale," on the property as a way of warding off prospective buyers. This has had an adverse impact on the gross domestic product of the state. The monumental battle between the children of Pa Agidigbi Uwagboa in the remarkable case of Agidigbi and Agidigbi led to the underutilization and depreciation in an otherwise magnificent property situate at a popular junction at number 34 Dawson Road, a property well known in Benin City. That property's commercial value has depreciated to such an extent that one can arguably refer to it as constituting dead capital. In 2001, Hernando de Soto coined the term dead capital to describe assets that cannot be converted to economic capital. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria holds at least $300 billion, or as much as $900 billion worth of debt capital in residential real estate and agricultural land alone. The high-value real estate market segment holds between $230 billion and $750 billion of value, while the middle market carries between $600 billion and $170 billion in value. Sir Alfred was strong in tradition and argued many of the cases that have now formed precedents in the area of inheritance. He, however, was dynamic, not so much in what he left for his children, but what he left in his children as transformational change agents. And this is done in
Right. Let me pause there, if you can hear me. At that point, we were, as I said, that documentary was done during my father's first anniversary in June. And the statement that was made there is, Sir Alfred, which is my father, it was not so much what he left for us. As a matter of fact, we don't know what he left for us because we haven't really investigated in any great detail. But what he left in us was far more important than what he left for us. The greatest parameter to deal with the issue of inheritance is what you leave in your children. A lot of people come to me to ask how they could either share their property amongst their children, or they see some misgivings between the children even before they pass on. A lot of it is as a result of what we have done in the way we brought up the children. If you bring up the children in the right way, the children will look to leave a legacy rather than competing and creating an acrimony on what they haven't worked for. I find that to be the most effective protection in the terms of inheritance. But I will talk about it when I speak later. I just end the, oh, okay. I hear that I'm faint. Let me just, I hope you can hear me better now.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. I got a message. Someone said I was faint.
Yeah, no, you're good. Right. I would have let you know.
Thank you. Right. So let me just end that documentary with 1 minute, and then we'll move on to the speak.
Consequently, we need to ask ourselves the question, how will our assets be distributed when we are no more? Will it add to or could it a clog to the gross domestic product of the state? These are matters which has to be internalized. As the Chinese saying goes, those who plant trees do not look to those trees to give them shelter, but to the unborn generation.
Right. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to share a document. I'm going to share my slides with you and speak to the slides, because obviously this is a topic which we cannot exhaust in 30 minutes. I have about 30 minutes. So I'm going to just touch on the issues, controversial as they are. All I would tell you is that there are ways in which we can circumvent quite a number of them. Right. The first question I ask is, why would you want to plan your estate, especially for those of you who live outside the country? Many of you might have property within Benin. This property may be dilapidated for a number of reasons. It may be that there's no one taking care, or it may be that there's a dispute, or it may be that you're a girl child, for that matter, maybe the only child. You may have been deprived. It is as a result of the failure often of parents to have an effective plan, estate administration plan, that gives rise to that. So we always ask the question, why do you want an estate plan? What is estate planning? What kind of assets can be distributed? Who can help you achieve the best estate planning goals? What are the challenges of estate planning? What are the factors for a successful estate plan? The next slide. Now, in what circumstance will custom be applicable? In what circumstances will you require a will? Why do you require a will? Is there a preference to use a will rather than just simply rely on custom? For a woman, let me just say this, it makes a lot of sense for you to have a will, because I would disappoint you that because women were considered as property in Benin, still women, the law, the custom is not clear at all. If a woman passes on, does her property goes on to the spouse, or does it go on to the children, or to her siblings? Usually the family will decide the best way in which the property should be divided, in the event that she doesn't have a will. So I will say to you that please consider having a will, especially if you're a woman. There are disadvantages of a will. Some of it is the fact that it is public, it is read in the high court, it takes time to distribute the property. But most importantly, once your will is read out in public, there will be many family members who will contest it. And that is why we, as a new generation, I used to have this discussion with my father, will suggest a trust. Many of you who live outside the country will know how a trust works. It also works here. If my father was alive, he would be sitting next to me and we'll have these debates, and you'll find it very interesting. We've done it in a number of forums.
Okay, it's me. Is it me? I can't hear anybody. Mr. Agobami, are you still there?
No, it's frozen out.
Okay.
We lost him.
Yes. While we are waiting for him, I think that's network in Nigeria for us. And again, I want to thank every one of you that are with us while we wait for him. I will say it's been a great, this will be one of multiple series. And I will say, if you like what is going on, go make sure you text or go to the ENA Edo Diaspora Women for GEO website or Facebook to at least like it, or make your comment underneath the broadcast. It's broadcasting in multiple sites now. Hopefully we can spread the message and the news, and the goal will be accomplished. Also, just to remind you, if you don't know, after the event, after the lectures and questions and answer, we're going to throw down. So that was the part that got me excited. So I got confused. I forgot all about the one before. So I'm ready for the party. But until then, we'll continue to wait for Mr. I keep calling him Dr. Agobami. I know he's going to be a doctor someday. But Madam Obasohan, do you have any words for us while we wait?
I just want to thank everyone. I'm really, really grateful for this event. I'm very appreciative of the media crew that has taken time out. And Kotunde, you have been very gracious to be a part of us. You know, women, we are very interesting people. And so when you see a man that will say, okay, yes, I'll come with you guys on this journey, we really appreciate you big time. We appreciate you. We appreciate the other media outlets that are helping us to, spread the word. But this is a topic that is dear to our hearts. And I was very happy when he mentioned a little while ago that women have a will, not just the men alone. Women do need to have a will. Okay, so after this session, I'm sure most of us will go back and say, you know what, it is true. My mother did have a will, and she was a woman from Edo State. And so it's a good thing for us women to really think deep and hard about having a will. I see Mr. Agobami is back he's back with us. Let's see if he can continue now.
Well, thank you, Mr. Agobami. If you're with us, you can take it from where you break off. But this is one thing we understand in technology, even in the space program. Sometimes we've lost an aircraft in space. So
let
just
me
lucky that we got them back. Dr. Agobami,
let me apologize profusely. We're supposed to be on a backbone. So really, I agree with you when you say that is something that we don't understand. We're actually directly on the backbone here. So I don't know what's going on. But anyway, I was just saying that for the girl child, for the women, it's important to have something because for the women, it is so unclear. For the male child, of course, if the patriarch of the family passes on, the first child will normally, if there's no will normally inherit the property for the benefit of the others, will inherit at least the house where the deceased lived and died, what we call the Gyogbe. Now, I am also going to deal with some entrepreneurial misconceptions in Edo State, but I'll talk about that much later. And then I will talk about this house is not for sale, and then talk about corporate trustees. Now, if you look at my slides very quickly, you will see that unlike businesses and families abroad, and I heard Pastor Rose Zenabo when she spoke, there is no transition of wealth. So if you think about the Guinnesses, Kellogg's, digestive biscuits, they would have established in maybe the 18th, 17th century, and they continue from one generation to the other. You do not have that much here. The generation following the one that established wealth will normally squander it, especially in this part of the world where there is often a dispute. Rather than the family coming together to build the assets of their predecessor in title, there is usually some disputes. The answer to it is perhaps a trust, and I will talk about that because that's what you use abroad. What is estate planning? It's simple. A conscious and intentional preparation for the management and disposition of assets. Just to think about it. And please, if you don't do anything, write on a piece of paper, handwritten. That perhaps will be admissible. It's not the best, but do something. What we find is people do absolutely nothing. And then there's an oral statement and an argument as to how the property should be distributed. If you go to the courts, 99% of the cases in courts in Benin relates to inheritance disputes. Now, this is the consequence of having a lack of clarity with your estate plan or having a lack of clarity with the law of succession. This house is not for sale. What normally happens, of course, is a disgruntled member of the family will have an inscription. If there is anything wrong with the inheritance, he simply writes, this house is not for sale, either because he's not been favored or because he thinks that he's entitled and he's not been given the property, and in some cases, legitimately so. That process of inscribing this house is not for sale has become the methodology of putting out to the world that there's a dispute in relation to that house. It's not a legal, formal way of doing it, but it is extremely effective because the investor or the purchaser will hardly buy a property where it states this house is not for sale. Now, let's compare with where you live and where we live in Benin. So on the left-hand side, we write there Nigeria because it's not just in Benin. This property is not for sale. You create dead capital. That property remains that way. On the right-hand side, what you normally get is that this property is for sale. So you create a business, in a business environment, whereas on the left, there is dead capital, affects the gross domestic product negatively, and you see that inscription, this property is not for sale and is there forever. Whereas on the right, it's there for a short while, money passes and you grow the economy. You can see the consequence of having those inscriptions, this house is not for sale. This house is not for sale creates abandoned property. The main issues giving rise to the description or inscription, this house is not for sale, the consequence is that you cannot establish ownership. It's not a registered title. There's poor documentation and the property remains there. What normally happens is the family have no money. The truth is the property is indeed for sale, but there's a question as to who to pay the sale price to. That's really what happens. The family is desperate to get money and to do things. So what we did as a solution in Bayelsa State, when I was required to do something like this, there was a dispute of this nature. And all the community members were struggling. And what we simply said is, do you want to develop the property? Say yes, but do not pay the money to my cousin. Do not pay it to my uncle. I am entitled. When you go to the cousin, he says the same thing. I am entitled. So what did we do? We paid the money into an escrow account, got interest, distributed it around all the disputing family members, and we were able to develop that asset. That has been close to 20 years now. The money in the escrow has not been recovered. Litigation is still on, but you have development and you have an interest running, which is being used to send the children to school. So what I'm saying to you is, please consult with good professionals, and there are a few who can help you when you have a problem. A lot of people simply just listen to gossips and then hope that that will solve the problem by simply applying a very informal method. These are all statistics to show the consequence of debt capital. I will not spend time on that. Who needs estate planning? Everybody needs estate planning. And I always break it down like this. Even if you have absolutely nothing, you just have your clothes, I'm sure if you think about it carefully, you will be mindful and you would want a particular person to go into your wardrobe and decide who to give those clothes to. It might be a church. You might want them to give it to a particular charity. That idea of having the right of a third party to distribute your clothes is an asset that is capable of distribution. You can write it down. Only my sister can go into my wardrobe to take my clothes to distribute it. So there's a misconception that only very wealthy people require to administer their estate. That is not correct. Everybody who's living has some sort of estate which has to be administered. Now, for those of you who live abroad, you need it more than anyone because your assets are distributed around the world. There are mechanisms by which you can bring all the assets under a particular structure and have that structure administer the assets for your beneficiaries. Some of your children will never come here. They don't want to come here. But you can create a scheme where your assets are generating income for your beneficiaries, regardless of where they live. I know a few of you have contacted me before, say, my children will never come here. What do I do with the assets? The assets can be put into a particular structure, generating income, but you do need trusted professionals. You need trusted estate surveyors. You need trusted accountants, and there are a few. What is the best time to have an estate plan? Yesterday. COVID has come to show us that life is fickle and nobody knows when we'll die. Everybody knows that one day it will happen. But if there was any period that suggests that you needed to act quickly, it is during the period of COVID. Why do people need estate planning? It's simple. You can avoid a lot of the inheritance problems. So let me tell you about my experience. My father wrote a simple dying declaration. In it, he says, I have 3 sons. No other person is my child. That was a smart way, and that was a very simple way to deal with it, because the gentleman who came and said he was his child was not permitted to partake in the burial. But then my dad left something in us that was very important. When he died, we went round all the family members. So we'd won their admiration and confidence. That's very important, because there was no family member who was ready to join this gentleman to question my paternity, or question my father's paternity and my primogeniture status. Very interesting, because it is traumatic, because before we buried my father, we had to go to court to stop this gentleman. It was an easy injunction we obtained because this gentleman had no real support from family members. And that is because we did what we had to do. It's very easy for many people to say, oh, I live in the UK, I live in Lagos, I will not respect our Egbe, that is the people who will conduct the burial. That's a very dangerous thing to do. Please train your children to understand that they have to give respect to the custom, even if you have a will, because the will is also subject to some customary rights. What kind of assets can be distributed? Any assets. And if you have assets abroad, all we simply do, if you lodge your will here, we we use that will, what we say in law, we reseal the will. You simply take it to America and you take it to the county court, and it will assist in distributing your property anywhere in the world. Vice versa, if you lodge your will in the United States, you can come here. As long as you pay the estate duty, your property will be distributed in accordance with that. But again, as I say, I believe trust is the best way to deal with this issue rather than a will. All the properties there that can be subject to distribution. Who can help an individual achieve the best estate plan? Again, professionals, and there are a few trust companies. It's not for me to mention them here, but please do your due diligence. Too many people use family members and they've got their fingers burnt. Do your due diligence. We are thinking of setting up some sort of platform where we can onboard professionals who are accountable, and therefore you can actually ask what is wrong and they can be held accountable if they did anything wrong, just like what you have abroad. What are the challenges? The main challenges that face everyone is a lack of information here. What do I do? Where do I go? I've got some questions people are asking. You might have to use private investigators, if I want to put it there, but there might just be lawyers who will assist you. But please use trusted lawyers. There'll be family members. You can verify what they're doing. It's a very unreliable legal environment, but that doesn't mean that they are not lawyers who can assist you, who have integrity. Just ask and you would get a result. If you ask and you do your due diligence, people will tell you of the type of professionals you will use. There's a very poor record keeping system here, which creates a lot of problem. But this governor has started some global information system with land, which also helps. You can do your due diligence there to help to avoid the challenges with estate planning. I just list here, this is basic. What are the factors for a successful estate plan? Take a pen, write out what your assets are, write out the beneficiaries, write out the charity that you want to give. A lot of people abroad donate to charity, either the church, the nursing home. And look, let me talk about the nursing home. In the past, people will leave their parents. I had that, their grandparents with family members. The family members are so impoverished and challenged that it is very difficult for them to take care of the aged here now. Some of you will bring them to America, but you kill them faster. The best thing I think for you in diaspora to do is to come together, crowdfunding, and create a beautiful nursing home where you'll be happy to see your parents. Many of you are troubled by that. As soon as you take them to America, they die very quickly because that environment is not comfortable for them. But meanwhile, at home, there's no one taking care of your aged parents. There's something you can do about it. It's often said that if you do not create, if you can't find a path to a successful venture, create one for yourself. I'm not going to go into any detail here. Custom is very strong. Again, try and create some sort of will so that custom is not what affects your property, because it's so nebulous, especially for women. Even the will, as you will know, again, as I say, it can create its own challenges. The essentials of a will, please use a professional and a good professional, because there are a number of things that you need to satisfy. I know abroad you can print out a form and just create your own will. The benefits of writing a will supersedes not having one. Not going to waste time on that. These are some of the challenges when you go to the probate in Benin, in other words, the court office, to read a will. Right there, you'll see the disputes and people are hissing and cussing and the litigation starts there. If you can avoid that process, please do. Now, this is an entrepreneurial misconception in Edo States, and all these are related to inheritance. There is a misconception that you cannot find anybody who is trustworthy. That is not correct. As I said, a few of us are coming together to set up a website which will mimic something like a small Amazon, where service providers will be entertained and then they can be held accountable. I have said that you can apply to the governor. A few of you can do crowdfunding and build a befitting cemetery. For a country, for a state that is so strong in culture, with where you bury your loved ones, and most people bury at home, but I tell you something, when the time comes and there's need to sell that property, usually the body is exhumed and taken to the cemetery. If you go to the cemetery, you will never want your loved ones to be buried there. If there are no private cemeteries, I think there's one license given out, we can come together, I mean the diaspora, and you can create a good one. We have beautiful cemeteries in Lagos. And you know, it is profitable to go into that venture. It is also profitable to go into the venture of guarantee entrepreneurs. In other words, there are a lot of young talents here who are looking for credit, and then they are looking for people who will sponsor them. I think you can make some money from them. Let me talk finally about the bronze we make in Benin. When I travel to India, I make my suits, but I don't need to travel there. I simply just give my specs to a tailor and they deliver it in my office. Ask yourself the question. The bronze is well known. It's a trade that is across the world. In other words, our skill and our skill in that area is well recognized. But yet, you can't have a bronze delivered in someone's doorstep for sale. The reason you can't is that the infrastructure is not there. So you need the skilled gentleman to produce it. You need a credit card system. You need to advertise it. You need a courier system. This can be created alongside the Edo State government. But if it's not doing that, then you can come together and create that market where people can have it delivered at their doorstep. I say to the diaspora, they're always waiting for people in here to do something. But you can get together and make it happen. I would maybe on a private discussion with some of you tell you what we've done. And we're practicing law here at a very interesting level. No kickbacks. And we're making some progress. So you can bring your values there and bring them here and things can happen. If you wait for the people here to create that value, then you're doing us a disservice because we need you to collaborate to make it happen. Corporate trustees, this is fundamental. I talked about the Guinnesses, I talked about the families, transition of wealth from one to another. In Africa, there's a misconception that because you have sons, they will automatically run your business or your family, the family inheritance in such a way that you want it to happen. In other words, take care of the younger ones. If you haven't brought your children up in a particular way, that will not happen. And the best way to circumvent all the complexity we talk about is to create a trust. So you simply transfer the business to a third party and it runs it in a particular way for the benefit of your children who may not be sufficiently competent to carry on with your business or with your assets. You're giving your child a responsibility that you know he cannot. That asset will be diminished. Trust is the answer. What you see here is we run our family like a trust. So my father's office is on the left, and then this is what we've done with it on the right. My mother is a caterer. My brother took after my mom. I ran catering for 4 years and then went back into law. So we took on the left Central Hotel, we took it over and the management on a lease. And this is what we've done with it on the right. This is what a trust does. We have decided as a family to build what has been left by our parents. And that's because from the one, what my father left in us was more important than what he left for us. But if he didn't do that, what he would have done in the alternative was to create a trust. The details of a trust I won't go into so that we can, I think I've overrun my time. I would end like this. These are my recommendations. Start thinking, especially for those of you who live abroad. I know that some of you will never come here. Please start thinking, if you have any asset here, think about it deeply about what to do. Don't just leave it lying fallow. You are creating an economic disservice to us here because it's not adding to the GDP. Train your children and let them understand that there is wealth. If you want to mine gold or diamonds, it's underneath the earth. There's a lot of wealth in Nigeria which can be unearthed by just training your children to understand. I had a story to tell you about Meadow Hall School, but I don't have that time. I will do it at another scheme. Keep a detailed list of your assets. Visit home regularly. And when you come, don't just come on holiday. find somebody to take you around and start thinking about what you do with your asset. Update your assets regularly. As I said before, engage the service of a knowledgeable professional. In conclusion, failing to plan is a normal cliche, is planning to fail. A notable lawyer in Nigeria created not a will, but problems. And I will not mention his name because he did not plan. Thank you very much, and God bless you. Thank you.
Wow, I'll just say wherever you are, give my brother a round of applause. I have to be partial here. Not only that I just love you as an Edo man and have known your family, but just the way you articulate and this has just renewed my faith that I can actually come back home and I can actually invest. And actually for the amount of integrity and the display you exude, this program already have accomplished with me what it was meant to do. If you will stop sharing your screen, sir. And the other item on the program was a toast by. Please pardon me because of how we started. Somebody was supposed to do the toast, Mrs. Obasoha. If you have somebody you appointed that they haven't really identified yet, please have that person if it's available. If not, we can also stop that. But actually, sorry, it was questions and answers.
Can I ask a question?
I stepped ahead of myself. So I will say, before we go further, I will say, I know a lot of people would like to speak directly and ask the questions, but just for the sake of time, I want to say, if you have questions, please put it on the chat room so we can we can group the questions together. We have men and women that are slated to just go through the questions, so we're not asking the same question over and over again, so that we can best utilize the very precious time of Agobami and Agobami. So I'll hand it over to my co-moderators if they have any questions that is already on the chat line. And also, if you have a direct question also you want to ask, you can also do so by using the reaction button at the bottom of your Zoom to raise your hand, but preferably write your questions on the chat line. Thank you.
There is a question on the chat right now.
Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Sister.
For our speaker, this question is from Sister Christiana, I think Oronsai. What is the impact of Section 3 of the Wills Law of Edo State via VIS, the capacity to make the will and bypass customary laws?
Do you want to ask a few questions, or you want me to just answer each question?
I think we should do like 3 questions at a time. It's about to read 3 questions at a time.
Okay, the next one. Hold on a second. The next question is, can a will be disputed when read in the absence of the first son due to out-of-state work, that an absence was not permitted by employer? Got it? The third question. What is the best approach to a situation where your house is put up for sale by a stranger out there? That is the first 3 questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let me address the first one, and in the order in which you asked them. The first question is Section 3 of the Wills Act. That's a popular section. Basically, even if you write a will, and this applies particularly to male, it is still subject to customary law as it relates to where the deceased lived and died, what we call the Igugbe. So even if you write a will and you give the Igugbe to a third party or to a younger sibling, the first son can contest that and is entitled to that property. Now, there was, before now, a substantial amount of debates as to whether if the child is recalcitrant or if he hasn't obeyed his father, whether you can disinherit that child from the Igigwe. Now, please note, it is the Igigwe, not the entire property. It was held in one of the cases, I think Osula and Osula it was, that even if the child is recalcitrant, if he's disobedient, you cannot disinherit him. You can only disinherit him if you went through a proper procedure of disowning that child, maybe in the palace. And it's a complicated procedure to disown in Benin. So by and large, what we say to everyone, look, regardless of what happens with the first son, you need to give him the property where you lived and died. It's sad because sometimes the first children, sometimes in Benin, you now get a situation where the first child is probably waiting for his father to pass on. And when the father passes on, he doesn't take care of the younger ones. That's not the idea of the Igigwe. You step into the shoes of your father to take care of the younger siblings. So you take the asset and the responsibility. Unfortunately, what we're saying, you want to take asset without responsibility. So that's the first question. That's what section 3 does. The second question, can a will be disputed simply on the ground that the first son did not attend the reading? I don't know the circumstance in which this question has arisen, so one has to be careful. Please seek legal advice. But I don't see why a will be disputed in those circumstances. The question is, who asked it to be read? Normally, somebody who has an interest will ask for the will to be read. The mere fact that the son is not there does not change the contents of the will. As long as the will is valid, I don't see any reason. Now, but this advice I give you, and people do this a lot, you take it and you go and contest with another lawyer. No. The circumstance in which the question is being asked has to be understood normally, but for a program like this, I won't answer a question of that nature if I don't know anymore. On a very pedestrian level, if there's nothing wrong with the will, inherently wrong with the will, that fact alone should not be a reason. But as I said, please seek legal advice. I don't know why the will be defective on that ground alone. Finally, a house is put up for sale by non-owners. That's very common here. One of the things I would say to a lot of people in the diaspora, try and make sure that you register your land. In other words, a lot of property is not registered, and that leads to dead capital. And when it's not registered, you have title running around. Try and make sure if it's within a registrable area, is one of the best ways of protection. If a house is sold by somebody who's not the owner, ultimately you will end up in courts to prove your title if you own it. Try and secure your title. What we observe here is a lot of people, especially in this diaspora, only react when the property is being disputed. If you come on holiday at Christmas and your father left you a property somewhere, please go and ensure that you secure the property as owner. Don't wait until somebody's encroaching on the property. That's what we get. And you get a phone call, oh, somebody's gone into my property. Secure it as early as possible. Do not create debt capital around, just leaving the property fallow. It's real money. You can sell it and change it to dollars. Some people who live abroad think that our money is worthless. It's not. Thank you very much.
Great. The next set of questions, sir, are first, what laws currently regulate a trust in Nigeria outside the 1677 statute of fraud and the 1959 property and conveyancing law? That was question one. The next question was, what do you do with a relative's assets who had no will and no children? What do you do with a relative's assets who had no will and no children? And the third in the series is, if we have a trust here in America and all our properties are in Nigeria, are listed, is that enough? Let me reread that. If we have a trust here in America and all our properties in Nigeria are listed, is that enough? So those are the next three questions.
Thank you very much.
And quick question, Mr. Agobame, before you do it, just in honor of those who asked the question, I will ask my co-moderators to at least say these questions were brought to you by XYZ. So
Thank you. I meant to do that, and that was an oversight on my part. Thank you, Brother Tunde. Our first question came from Yamin Makogor, and that was the one about what laws are currently regulate a trust in Nigeria. And the second question that was asked came from Dr. Stella, and it is, what do you do with the relatives' assets who have no will and no children? And the last question was, I'm sorry, if we have a trust, that was from Mr. Godwin Amor, which is, if we have a trust here in America and all our properties in Nigeria are listed, is that enough? Thank you, Brother Tunde, for that, correcting that oversight.
May I quickly add that we can, before he starts, the next set of questions, we can use the Zoom floor to make it a bit more interactive, so people can ask questions and then we alternate it. Please go ahead, sir.
Right.
And also, if we are using the Zoom floor, they have to signify by raising up their hand in the Zoom so that we'll call them accordingly. I can only see one hand being raised right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. And this is Oviasu and my sister, Mrs. Audu, please coordinate that.
And we do have some questions in the chat as well. So we want to honor that, and then we'll take the sporadic ones.
Beautiful.
Okay. Thank you very, very much indeed. The first question is, what laws affect trust in Nigeria? And the question identified two specific laws, 1677 Law of Trust and then 1979 Property Conveyancing Act. The law that affects trust in Nigeria is the common law. And then any of the laws that exist in England before 1900, to the extent that that law has not been repealed. This question is very interesting because our laws of trust, and when I say laws, I say statutory laws. Whoever asked this question may be a lawyer. The statutory laws are archaic, but we still use them. But more importantly, the general common law of trust is applicable. That is the principle. And therefore, when I say trust, maybe I expand. What it simply means is, and I say that for the non-lawyers, you just transfer the asset to a third party. And I always recommend a living trust. You transfer the assets to a third party to hold it on trust for the benefit of your beneficiaries. And you have a living trust, which means you can bypass probates. You can also have a testamentary trust, which means you create the trust in your will. That generates all the challenges and all the complexities that you will have by reading a will in public. So if you met a professional and they will tell you, you are better off with a living trust. And it's just simple. Sometimes we say to transfer, you pay a small consideration. If I had the time, I'll tell you what my father did with a very prominent family, which worked. But that's a story, just a simple way in which he bypassed a lot of the complexities that custom will create. So the simple answer to your question is that the common law, the general law applies. The laws that exist before 1900 apply. The 1959 Property and Conveyancing Act that would have anything to do with trusts will apply if the property is within the area where the Conveyancing Act applies. Of course, whoever asked that question knows that there are different areas in Nigeria, different laws apply. But the common law should be able to resolve the problem. The second question is to do with the Dr. Stella, who asked whether a gentleman or a lady who's passed on, doesn't have any children, and doesn't have a will. What normally happens is there's a order, a pecking order in which you distribute property, depending on whether it's custom or whether it's statutes. And that pecking order is usually children, I think parents, siblings, relatives, in that order, in the blood order, and then you continue to expand the group. If there's nobody in one group, you go to the next group. So if the person has no children it will now be siblings. I think parents may come before siblings. The custom, because there's no will, it will now be the custom, and the custom as it relates to what we call our egbe, how they will now distribute the asset. But it's also the same principle. They go from children, there are no children, you go to siblings, no siblings, go to relatives, and then you start going in that way. You will find a relative if you draw a family tree. We have a very strong family tree of Bedoyo, so it's impossible not to find relatives going back. And if you get to that point where you can't find anybody, you register with a public trustee and you take it to charity. Finally, the third question is if you create a trust in America. Very interesting, and I'll tell you about the trust in Europe. We have created and we've established a number of cross-border trusts. Make sure it's not sufficient to just list the property in your trust. Make sure that the property is incorporated into the trust. Let me explain that. What we've done is we've set up companies and we use companies to hold different properties. And then we have a holding company, maybe it's an American holding company or UK holding company that holds those assets and then indirectly holds the property. Once you do that, your trustees can have control. Just listing the property may not be sufficient. I don't know. And so you use a combination of lawyers in America, lawyers here. We have done quite a few in Europe. I haven't done any in America. But make sure that you get advice from the jurisdiction where you are setting up and domiciling the trust, as well as the jurisdiction where the property is domiciled, so that you incorporate the property into the trust. A mere listing might not be sufficient. Thank you very much.
Before my sister goes with the next three questions, I want to say this very quickly. There's a rising request for our speakers' information, and we will be sure to make that available. So my sister co-moderator, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much.
Where did you start from?
Just to say that my name is not ENAW. When we had a break in transmission, you'll see my name reflecting ENAW Simpson. My name is Osaro Egobame. So I will correct that just before we end. Thank you.
The next question is from this person. I can't see no name. He said from me to everyone.
Just go ahead, please.
Okay.
Read the question.
Hold on. Dr. Stella, what do you do with a relative's assets?
That question has already been taken.
Okay, where did you stop?
The next one would be the difference between.
Is it Elizabeth Ogogo?
No, Ivie Obayabona.
Okay, from Ivie Obayabona says, what is the difference between a will and a living trust? What is the difference between a will and a living trust? Then another question from Sister Ebegwe Ogiame says, what is the average cost to prepare a trust for diaspora and Nigeria residents and company? Would you recommend? Then the next question is from Christiana Rosai. Must a will or trust be prepared only in Nigeria? Can I prepare a will or trust in the US? And would that be valid in Nigeria? That is the last three questions.
Actually, have two more after that, and then we'll open the floor for the interactive questions.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me deal with the first question. The first question, I think, was from Obayabona. A will and a living trust. There's a fundamental difference. In fact, if you take anything away from this lecture, it must be this difference. A will is simply you indicate in the document what you want to happen when you pass on. And it doesn't take effect until the day you pass on. And until it is read in court, we say that the will is admitted to probate. It is usually read in the open. The property is not distributed until that process takes place. When you read it in court, well, I tell you about Benin. Almost immediately, there's a challenge to the will. If there's no challenge to the will, you then pay all the estate duty. It takes time because they'll publish things in the newspaper and all that. So we say that the will is ambulatory. In other words, it takes effect only after the deceased is dead. And you can revoke that will anytime until that the day you give your last breath. A living trust, on the other hand, is you take your assets today and you transfer it to a third party. Gani Fawemi is a renowned lawyer. He transferred his business to first trustees, or first marina trustees, I think they were. So his son, who is now late, when he died, tried to challenge that transfer. And he was told in no uncertain terms that that property did not belong to his father anymore because he created a living trust. So it doesn't form part of his estate for anybody to challenge it. It's not his. Once you transfer it, you transfer the legal title. So it's no more your property. So there's a fundamental difference. And we recommend that if you have sufficient assets, sometimes you may not have sufficient assets to create a living will. But if you do, it's the best way to circumvent a number of the problems in custom as well as wills. So that's the first question. The second question, what is the cost of preparing a trust? It's very difficult to second guess, so it's very difficult to give any indication because it depends on a number of things. It depends on the nature of the assets. It depends on the number of states in which the assets are spread over. It depends on the complexity of the assets. People are creating trust with cryptocurrency today. You have to understand how that works. So it's difficult. It is slightly more expensive than creating a will, if that is what you want to hear. But ultimately, the will does not achieve its objective, so it becomes more expensive when family members start disputing the will. So people ask me which is relatively more expensive. In terms of putting your hand in your pocket and paying for a service, of course, creating a trust is more expensive than the will. But in terms of the opportunity costs, in terms of the cost of using one or the other, it is far more expensive for the will because almost, maybe 60% of wills are contested. Why that is so is because of the nature of the thinking and the value system. Now, this is for Edo women diaspora. For the women, as I said earlier on, because even the custom is not clear, please state your intention in any form, perhaps in a will, as to how you want your property to be distributed for your children, because family will come up and they'll distribute it in a way that you might not intend. And finally, the final question, if I create a will in America, is it acceptable in Nigeria? Yes. What normally happens is the will be validated in America, and you bring it here, you take it to the probate section. We say that it is admitted so that you pay your duties. Everywhere you take a will to, the will be, if you create a will and you lodge it in the High Court in Benin, that will can be taken to America and you can access the asset, but you must pay the duty. And so we say that you take it to the county court there and they look at it, they validate it is correct. You then pay the stamp duty to access the assets that is incorporated in that will. And it's vice versa. If you bring your will from America, you have an asset here, you have to pay the estate duty. So you must take it to the probate. The probate will confirm that the will is authentic and that you have done the right thing wherever the will was created, and then you will access your property. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have a set of a couple of questions, and then we'll do a couple of interactives. After the 2 questions, we will come to you, Sister Tina Iyare and Sister Itohan Hollis. So this question here is similar to what you've heard. How do I get my property registered in Nigeria? And the second one has to do with something you presented, sir, on your personal example. The first question was from Sister Nancy Saiki. How do I get my property registered in Nigeria? And this other question came from Dr. Stella, who's, no, I'm sorry. This was from Yamin Makogwo, who said, please, sir, was the trust created by your dad or by the surviving beneficiaries? And that had to do with the personal example you gave. This questioner is looking for more details, I suppose, to get context within your example. And then we'll come to Sister Tina Yare and Sister Itoha. Thank you.
All right, the first question is, how do you get your property registered? So what we do here is, I always advise everybody to try and get a certificate of occupancy from the governor. I mean, the process is, it's a process that any young lawyer can follow. My colleagues have tendered something here for me. It's a process, it's a mechanical formal process. You pay an application fee, you get your real documents, what documents of title you have. It may be an inheritance from your parents. It may be just a simple transfer. Now, it may be that you have no documentation at all. That creates a problem. And therefore, you would have to start making an application based on how you came across it, maybe by custom, because that in itself is okay. If it's by custom, you swear an affidavit, you have your identity card, and then there's evaluation, and you get it, you get a CFO, is then registered, a certificate of occupancy. But those are pedestrian things. Any good lawyer can simply help you with a process, a mechanical process. Once, as I said before, once you come, just make sure you do something about it. And it doesn't have to be by Gubame and Egobame. It can be by any trustworthy lawyer, you know. So that's the process. Your registration fee, your documents or title that you have. If you don't have any document, you swear an affidavit, it will be valued, you will pay some fee, and then you get your title document. Sometimes there will be need for, of course, publication to make sure that no other person has an interest in the property, okay? Now, Sister Nancy, was a trust created by your father? No. So what I normally do when I have the time, and I'm sure maybe in other lectures, my colleagues, what I normally do is to compare what 3 renowned lawyers did. I didn't do that here. That's why you didn't see the difference. So Gani Fawemi set up a trust. Chief Williams had a holographic will, which he drafted in 1959. Egobamia had a dying declaration. Egobamia had a dying declaration. In other words, he had a piece of paper where he said, I have 3 children. If anyone comes up and says he's my son, please do not permit that person to attend the funeral. That in Benin is a master stroke. Because if the family does not permit the first son or his son to partake in the burial, then you are not entitled to inherit his property. So he used a very simple method. Now, we ended up going to courts simply because we didn't want any embarrassment. If you live in Benin, sometimes corps are disputed and all sorts. And he had gone to the bigger family setting. I come from a very huge family, Ogbedoyo. And he'd gone there and written a letter. Sometimes people do all sorts. They would arrest older family members because they're supporting one side or the other. So there are 2 things we did that made it extremely successful for us. One is my dad had that dying declaration, so it was easy to get an injunction. 2 is once my dad died, there's a particular way in which we announce death in my family. Every family has its own way. We went through that process. So we had won the respect and admiration of all the elders. So nobody joined the other gentleman, or not anybody significant. So that worked. Now, Gani had a trust, so it was easier. There was nothing the son could do because the property was not his anymore. And so we say the trust is the best. Chief Williams had a holographic will, which they found out much later. To be fair, that will was found out much later. So before then, the children came together, or other family friends, well-wishers came together to help to resolve their dispute. As I speak to you today, that dispute has not been resolved. It's still in the Supreme Court, and it's tearing the family apart. So you had three renowned advocates. One had a will, holographic will. There's so much problems, still not been resolved. One had a dying declaration, slight problem, now resolved. I'm happy to be talking to you. There's no more issue. And then another had a trust, fantastic. We now have a publication, which is continuous. Gani, for lawyers, they know Gani produced the Nigerian Weekly Law Report. That's the report that exhibits the judgments from the court to the Supreme Court in Nigeria. Because of what Gani did, that business has succeeded his generation, and the next generation is continuing, and the trust generates income for his family. So the trust was the best amongst these three lawyers. That's what I meant. So my father used the dying declaration, which worked, but I think a superior method must be the trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agobami. You notice I changed your name.
Thank you very much. And you made me honorable.
Of course, you are actually, there's no better adjective to qualify that. Please accept that. That was just even, I was looking for something better because you deserve it. I really appreciate it. And moving on, I also will encourage my co-moderator to actually let, as you begin to assign people from the floor to speak, please, as you introduce one, let the other person who is coming up next know, so we'll be properly prepared. And even if possible, give them a number 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. We can now go forward.
Okay, before we move forward, some of them want the speaker to please put your information on the platform so that they can be able to contact you with their issues back at home with their properties. If Barrister Agobami, if you can please put your information on the platform for them to have access to it. Thank you.
Well,
at this time,
And put it on the chat.
On the chat.
Yes, because I think the organizers would prefer that we have just an interaction rather than my information can be obtained, I'm sure. But anyway, I'll leave it to the organizers. Thank you.
Okay, we can see Tina Yari hands up. Do you want to ask your question?
Good afternoon, my dearly sisters, organizers, and Barrister Agobami. I have like 2 questions. I was the one that asked about the will being read in the absence of the first son, because that will apparently was not signed by the deceased father, as well as the Gyogbe was given to the current wife in the house, while the apartment in the back of the house was given to the first son, uncompleted building. So that's why I wanted to make sure that you got the clarification on that. We're going to strictly go instruction on those issues. So when we get your information, maybe I can reach out to you on that. And my other question, I've resolved my issues. My question is, my mother passed away, and to date, my sister refused to produce the original document of the properties. However, the family divided the will. Part of the property was mine, and we made sure it was notarized in the courthouse, and it's already been built on. Will there be a dispute in the future that can make me lose that property, my mother's land that was given to me?
Let me understand your let me understand your question, even though I would refrain from giving you any specific legal advice on a platform, but I'll talk about it generally. Your sister has the document of title, and I didn't get the facts fully, but as I said, I will not give you legal advice. It would be dangerous to do that, but I will talk about it generally. Let me understand you clearly. Your sister has the document, but you were assigned the property. Is that what you're saying?
We practically were split on the property. Yeah, she has half a portion and I have a portion.
So what is the dispute? What's the difficulty?
Because my question is, I was concerned that she could reclaim it later. That's the reason she's not producing the document, because she had it right before my mother's death, and within that month it disappeared. And so when the family divided the property, one of my main concerns was that she wanted to reclaim this at a later date. So I made sure it was approved and signed at the High Court. So my question is, will that affect me at all? And also I went further to secure it by surveying my portion of the property before I built on it. So my question is, since I don't have the original C of O of the property, is that going to affect me in the future?
Well, have you demanded that you partition the property officially from her?
Well, tried. I tried, but what she did, which was one of the contentions before my mother's death, was she built a parlor, like a room and a parlor, towards my side of the property. And she put her sockaway on my side of the property. So even the borehole was put on so the family was really vehemently upset. Everyone is already aware of what happened. My mom was very upset before she died. So it's like she was trying to secure everything. So it's really hard. If I cut her off, she would not have a water sockaway system or anything. So I'm trying to be the younger one to keep everyone together, which is one of the reasons my mother gave me that property. So,
very good.
So I'm trying to include us, and even to fence the house, I'm trying to fence both houses together as one home. So I'm trying to maintain peace. My fear is the future bite.
With due respect, the point well made, and Mr. Agobami, I think her concern is if the documentation she already have will protect her from the future. Any other detail, I think she needs to get your information.
I think so too. What you have is good, and you're on the right track. But you need to seek legal advice going beyond that if you want to.
Thank you.
Let me just clarify something. I see on the chat there's this question about Chief Williams. So yes, Chief Williams did not have a will. What happened was, from what we understand, when his property, they had gone to court and on their account that he didn't have a will. Then they found the 1959 handwritten, which we refer to as a holographic will, which introduced some further dimension to the problem. Now, it's clear that Chief Williams himself may have forgotten that he ever wrote anything like that. But the holographic will, interestingly, is still a valid document. So that has introduced further complications in the issues from what we read. But anyway, the important thing is that if he had a will, or if he had a trust, unlike Ghani's case, he would have been much better. Unfortunately, there are all sorts of complications. So I see the chat, and there's an interesting thing going on the chat. Thank you. Yes.
Can we call on Sister Mavis Sloan?
Sister Mavis Sloan, and after Sister Mavis Sloan, who will be next?
The next will be Helen Icing.
Thank you. Helen on standby.
Mavis Sloan, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Bryce Obamia. My question is, if you have a house that you had built for your aged mom, and the house is you built everything, and the house, because you put your mom there, after she was unable to take care of herself over there and was moved out of that home to a different home, and she passed away over there, And then because she loved the village and we have to, she had said she wanted to be buried in the village over there. So she happened to be buried in my house that I built for the village. And if the first son of my mom is not claiming to be a medium and now want the property, does that make him have a legal right to that home?
This is the property you built for your mom or the property
Yes.
where you buried
Yes,
her?
the whole village know it.
So you build up that property, is it in your name?
I just built it. It's a village house, but it's a kind of modern house. I built it in the village.
Is it in your name? That's the question.
Receipt. I don't even know where receipt are, but the whole village know that I built it.
Okay. So
No title,
even
no plan, nothing. We just put the foundation
yes.
down.
Okay, even in the village, I can tell you something. The head of the village will normally, it's just like farmland. Farmland is owned by a certain clan, a certain group. Who owns the land? How did you acquire that land? Is it through inheritance or through the head of the family?
We paid for it. The village, when the dispute started, they gave the receipt in my name because they know I built it. We have that receipt. Yeah.
Right. So you own it. So if you own it, then he cannot legally claim because it's not for your mother. If it was for your mother was a tenant there, tenant at will. In other words, she wasn't paying anything. You made her stay there. So you own it. It looks that way. In other words, please, whatever I tell you on this platform, it's very general. I'm not going to give specific legal advice. I don't use it because it's dangerous when we haven't investigated further facts to give specific issues. I see people asking me very specific questions. Law is usually a bit more complicated than that. But on the face of it, it looks like you own it. And the general principle is that if you own it, it's not for your mom. If it was for your mom, he probably had some claim, but it's not for your mom. You own it. So I don't
Thank you.
Other claim. Yes.
Thanks.
Before we go any further, I hate to interrupt, but we had someone whose hand has been up for a while. Sister Itoha Hollis, would you please unmute and ask your question, and then we'll go on with the queue. Sister Itoha, please.
Is muted, I think. Can't hear.
Okay. We'll go on with the queue then and come back to her. But she had been patiently had her hand up for a while.
Can she unmute herself?
I'm on mute.
Yes.
Okay, can you speak
Go
louder?
ahead.
Hearing me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, please speak up.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Wow, this is very, very informative.
Your voice is kind of low. Maybe you need to turn up your volume.
It's very low. Okay. Is it better?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. You're good.
Okay. Yes, my question has been answered. It was my question that my question was, I'm the owner of the property that somebody, a stranger out there, just put up for sale. It is very, very heart-wrenching to hear the news that your property that is being occupied by your family, somebody else is negotiating for it out there. Anyway, I know you've given me what to do. I have every legal documentation. My question now is that what I did, I seek legal advice. They told me to write a sign on my wall. This house is not for sale. So that I have done so far. I wrote on my fence, this house is not for sale. This one has proper legal documentation. My advice now is that necessary? Do I still leave it on or just go and wipe it off? Number two, what do we do as a society? Because I know you had mentioned that this thing is now very common. People putting people's property out there for sale is very common. What do we now do as a society to curb these nefarious activities? Sir, thank you.
A quick question, sir. Housekeeping, please. If you are not speaking, do not turn on your microphone. What happens is that it automatically defaults to you while somebody else is speaking. I am doing the work of muting people. Please, with due respect, let's respect those who are speaking and mute yourself. When your time comes, please unmute yourself. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think the inscription, "This house is not for sale," has become extremely effective. But what you can also do is to, if your property is registered, you can yourself place a caution in the registration, which is the proper thing to do. Since you're not thinking of selling your property and all that, you can use those informal ways. Most of those who use it actually don't have any interest in the property. They're stopping the rightful owner from selling. But if you're the rightful owner, you can do it formally by registering a caution in the registry if your property is registered. And if it's not registered, please try and ensure that you get it registered. In other words, get a certificate of occupancy. And you can also put a caution there yourself to indicate to everybody that you have not given anyone any power to sell, and anyone who wants to have anything to do with your property should contact you. So yeah, that's fine. And you asked the second question, the socio-economic consequence is high. I think the government can do something. I think we can open a register where people can just simply register validly cautions. Because when you do that, then the person who is the custody of the register can investigate preliminary whether or not you have a right. Because what's happening is anybody can insert and simply just create debt capital. The property is not sold. The person has no interest. Maybe a family member who has no interest. So I think it's something that government needs to look into and create an alternative, a more secure method of exhibiting interest, adverse interest in property. There's nowhere in the world where you have this is not for sale littered over the whole place, creating debt capital. So that's my advice on that issue.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, can we call the next person? I can see Sister Dorothy Obomo's hand up. Can you unmute yourself, ma'am, and ask your question? Can you unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
I did. Are you hearing me? Good afternoon, everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon, Barrister Egobamie. I have a quick question. I want to find out, can a will be read at home? If read, how authentic is it, please? I want to know that. Maybe in presence of the whole family, plus the Okagbe of it and everything.
Oh, yes. It means that that will was not lodged in courts. And it can be read at home because it was lodged in courts.
Yes, it was.
Well, if you read it at home,
yes,
you would not have given it the full authentic validity, because if it is lodged in courts, then we say that you have to admit it legally. And the way to admit it legally is to read it in the probate office. Now, the fact that it is read at home doesn't make the will, doesn't invalidate the will. All it simply means is that as a will, and you haven't taken it to probate, it means you haven't paid the necessary duties that you have to pay. And, you know, you are now avoiding, the state is now being deprived. But it doesn't necessarily affect the validity of the will, the fact that it was opened. But the proper thing to do is to read it. Since it's lodged in court, you apply, and then it is read, and there is a process of administration. That's another thing. Those who are the administrators in the will may not have the full backing of the law yet, because they need the law. That's why you need somebody in court to read it out. They might still have to go there to admit it to probate.
Okay, thank you very much. Because later, I think after a while, some of my step people, my step brothers, they came up that, oh, this will was read at home. We want to go to court now to read it in the probate.
So a kind of confusion came up, but I don't know. We are still on it anyway.
Well,
That's why I'm asking.
I'll tell you something.
Yes.
When people are dissatisfied with the content of the will, they will find all manner of reasons to challenge your will, no matter how innocuous. Unfortunately, once the challenge starts and you start going to courts, it can take years. So it's an undue pressure. One of the things I will advise, we now have a multi-door system, which is mediation. If you ever have a problem now and it's in court, call for mediation. It ends in about 3 months. That's a better way to deal with the problem.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to call Pastor Rose as a number to ask your question.
Yes, thank you so much. I have a question. The question is, a mother has, this is a scenario. A mother has a land and a younger child, thought that the mother was suffering, no place to stay, and built a house on that land. She's basically the last child, but she was able to afford it. So now Mama is gone. Who has right? Is it the one that built on that land, or the first son that by custom, like you said, women don't really have, so that is the situation.
So originally the bare land belonged to Mama, correct?
Yes, yes.
Wow. Okay, so in law, when you build a structure on land, everything on that land belongs to the owner of the land. In other words, unless the daughter had gone into a special arrangement with Mama to say, I'm putting up this structure on your land and you will pay me back, it is assumed that, Lord, that everything on the land is owned by the owner of the land, okay? Therefore, by custom, unfortunately, the older sibling who is male may then take the property. Now, common sense is normally introduced with things like this if there are siblings who have some understanding. So during the family distribution, because there's no will, I guess, so it's custom, it will be raised in that permission that the young man who now is entitled to it should note that the property, especially if it's an organized family, the Okaigbe will tell them that, look, this place was built by your sister. Yes, you own it, but why don't you reach an arrangement where she can have some interest? How the Egbes resolve issues also is very important within the family. So legally, the property, your simple question, legally, it looks to me, again, I say this without giving specific legal advice, it looks to me that the son will own it. But when the family is distributing property, they can call him aside and tell him that, look, you know that your sister built this. Why don't you give her something?
Thank you.
Before we call the next person with the hand up, there's a sister that we had asked to ask a question. She sent a text that she got called out from the Zoom, but she want me to ask the question: can a property with C of O be encroached upon? That is a question from Sister Helen, I see.
Yes. Any property can be encroached upon. I think the proper question, will the encroacher have any legal rights? He should not. If your C of O was authentically obtained, sometimes C of O are fraudulently obtained. So you go, the fact that you have C of O is not sacrosanct. There are circumstances where you have obtained the C of O and you have procured it in an illegal manner. But anybody can encroach in anything. Now, the governor of Edo State is trying as much as possible to create different groups to stop this illegal encroachments. Because you see, what normally happens, because the legal system is ponderous, you will find a situation which I think one of the participants asked a question that how can somebody else just come and sell my property? it is preposterous, really. It is very irritating. My father has a vast amount of land somewhere, and people just encroach. And you find yourself having to go to courts, and it takes time to resolve it because they know that. Then after a while, you try to settle. So the legal system, the ponderous legal system also contributes to this. But as I said, there's now a system of mediation. The governor is setting up different panels to help. So those are macro problems. But if you have your C of O, ultimately you will succeed against an encroacher.
Thank you, sir. We're going to call our sister, Dr. Stella. Can see your hand up.
Okay.
Can you unmute yourself, please?
Yeah, I have done that. Thank you, my fellow engineer. Thank you, Barrister Egobami. Thank you for the excellent presentation. I think the question I'm going to ask has you have kind of answered the question through your presentation and also through answering other questions. But anyway, let me go ahead and ask the question. The question is, who owns a house, Igiogbe's house, that has no will? Is it the first son or everybody?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. And that question is a question that has created a lot of problems here. Legally, the Igiogbe, the title to the property, is owned by the first son. Therefore, it is the first son's property. Now, unfortunately, we have to go into history. What is the concept of Igiogbe? I think in the 13th century, that's how it all started. One of the Obas had said he wanted his first son to take after him. And he said he would train the first son to be very disciplined, because before then, some time ago, there used to be a lot of dispute as to who will be the Oba. So the Benin said, well, if you're going to do it for yourself, especially the chiefs, we would also want our first sons to take over. And they will be trained in such a way that they are disciplined. So you see the Oba will send his son to, he goes to Uselu, Idaike, and they're training him to take over leadership. The Queen of England does the same, sends his son to. So as a leader, what he does is that he takes the assets and then steps into the shoes of his father and takes up the responsibility. Usually the younger wives, younger children, he trains them using the father's assets, usually the main house where he lived and died, steps into his shoes and takes over his farmlands as well. So the chiefs in Benin cannot distribute it. There's two property. So the lesser plebeians like us, who are not chiefs, we use our own property as the Igiogbe. We give it to our first son to help that first son look after the other children. So you see rooms in the house are let out and rent is collected. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that moral obligation, it's not a legal one now because the law has said the first son is the owner. A lot of first sons have not been brought up to understand that. In fact, if you understand the responsibility, you will run as a first son to take over your father's rest. My father was taking care of a lot of people, school fees. My brothers and I have taken over that responsibility. We're paying a lot of school fees for a number of people. Now, so what the first son does in Benin, unfortunately, gets into the house, he draws a line. Well, if you cross that line, you're in trouble. Sends all the wives away, sends all the children away. Unfortunately, that's an irresponsible first son. However, the law seems to protect him because the law still has not said that if you're irresponsible, you're no longer entitled to the Igiogbe. So the simple and unfortunate answer to your question is that regardless of how irresponsible the first son is, he can come in and send everybody out. The law will not stop him. But that's not what it should be. So what I say to people is train your children to understand the first son that, look, this property is family property and all your brothers and sisters can stay here until they are well enough to stand on their own. And you have a duty to take care of them. So as I said earlier on, what you leave in your children is more important than what you leave for them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We're just
If
going
I
to
may
limit the
interrupt,
last three questions
my
because
co-moderator,
time.
Sister
Yeah.
Bosse, if I may interrupt, because there's a follow-up question to the one asked by the pastor, by Pastor Rose Azenabo.
I was going to read that from Chris.
Okay, good.
Right?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, from Chris Audu. But what I'm saying, after Chris Audu's question, we only have 2 more questions so that we'll bring this question and answer section to an end because we have other things we're planning to do. Mr. Chris Audu, can you go ahead and ask your question, please? Can you unmute yourself?
Thank you, ma'am. The question was a follow-up question to the one asked by the pastor, where a younger sibling had built on a land that belonged to the mom. I was wondering if statute of limitation will apply in that instance.
Well, the question, if I recall, was whether, the statute of limitation will apply if it's an act that is concluded. But if it's a continuing act, if you have a trespasser on the land, unless the trespasser gains adverse possession over a number of years. But if it's a continuing act, I don't see how that will apply. But again, these issues will have to be looked at in great detail and see what it is that the specific complaints are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Audu.
Okay, the next person is Sister Christiana, I think, Oronsai. We already answered your question.
Thank you so much. It's actually Christian, it's a man.
Oh, so, Christian. I'm sorry, Christian Oronsai.
That's fine. Thank you so much, Leonard Silk. I'm also an attorney. I'm also an attorney licensed to practice both in Nigeria and in California. Thank you so much for that expository work. I just have a couple of concerns, and I think that is something that we left out, one of which is the impact of religion and custom, which discourages people to make will. I have seen a lot of people who readily don't want to make a will because by making a will or trust, they believe that you're going to die early. This is something that has to be worked on because people who are young at heart, people who are young in terms of age, do not really want to do a will because of their fear that making a will suggests that you're going to die early. I think that's something that needs to be addressed for people to begin to look into the aspect of making wills and trusts to avoid future disputes. And also, I also wanted to just make a contribution on, I know you made so much reference to trust in Nigerian context. I think the US is pretty much more flexible. There is what we call a living trust. A living trust allows you, even though still alive, you can continue to manage your assets until you die. A living trust allows you to avoid the issues of probating your will. So it's like a contract. The courts over the years have defined a living trust as a contract such that it can allow you to manage your property and distribute it outside a will. And I think that is something that the Nigerian legal system should start looking into. In the course of your lecture, you also mentioned issues about the elderly. We don't have
people are fighting and the value
doesn't even worth it.
It's not worth it. So I would say that if there's any issue like that, please take it to the mediation. There's now a mediation process and it's a cheap way to resolve many of these problems. Do not go to the high courts. I mentioned Agidigbe and Agidigbe. My father did that case all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, look at that property on Downton Road. It's a relic of itself and it's dead property value.
It doesn't even worth it.
It's not worth it. So I would say that if there's any issue like that, please take it to the mediation. There's now a mediation process and it's a cheap way to resolve many of these problems. Do not go to the high courts. I mentioned Agidigbe and Agidigbe. My father did that case all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, look at that property on Downton Road. It's a relic of itself and it's dead property. No one is earning anything from it.
And please just introduce to any of these disputes some common sense. Let people understand that you can earn some money, everybody can be happy. And then you can even convert it. Speak to somebody, their trustees, their lawyers who will come in with some dynamic ideas to resolve many of these problems. It's not worth fighting over.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to call Honorable PRO for Edo Diaspora Women for Jill to go ahead and do the toast. Sisters, you all get your drinks ready. Why Sister Ito and Hollis will go ahead and do the toast for us.
Where's the toast?
There's my wine bottle, my champagne bottle.
There you go.
You can all unmute yourself because you're going to be toasting.
Hello.
Before we do the toast, I want to thank Mr. Egobamie and his team for coming to celebrate with us on this occasion. We really, really appreciate your presence here, sir. And I know we have learned a lot of new information from you. Thank you for your presence. We appreciate you. And this is going to be something we will repeat. We'll have like a two-part section coming up soon. I will let everyone know the next couple of sessions. I'm sure we are still yearning for more viable information from Mr. Egobamie. Thank you so much, sir. All right, so go ahead, please.
Everyone.
We are not hearing you.
Okay, go ahead.
We are not hearing you, Sister Itoa.
Carry over. I know this lady.
I'm on mute.
We're not hearing.
We can't hear you.
How is that? Better?
Finish.
No.
You can get somebody else to do the toast. If she's not responding, let's not wait.
Mr. Bossa, go ahead, please.
Please.
Okay, Sister Ito, it looks like you have technical difficulties from your end. We cannot hear you. Unmute yourself.
She's upside down. Please just go for it. Somebody.
Okay, ladies, we are going to toast first of all to God Almighty who kept us alive. We all know what is going on in the world, but we thank God that we are still in the land of the living, standing. We are here. So we are going to toast to the Almighty God first before we start toasting to ourselves here. So this is a toast to God for keeping us all alive.
Thank you, Lord.
Amen.
Thank you, Jesus.
Amen.
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 We're going to peace. Peace in Edo State, in Nigeria, Edo State in particular.
Yes.
Women make things work. Women are the backbone of the house.
Amen.
And we women, we will continue to move from grace to grace in the mighty name of Jesus. We women, this weekend, which is Labor Week weekend, is a weekend that we normally come together to celebrate ourselves with the Edos abroad, called ENAW over here. But this is the second year that ENAW convention has been cancelled due to the pandemic. But I thank God for our dynamic, amiable, strong woman leader, Mrs. Oba Sohan, who did not let the pandemic close us up. No matter the circumstances, she continued to work tirelessly and energize all of us to work with her for us to continue to celebrate ourselves. This is the normal women conference that we could have had during the convention anyway. We had it last year and we are having it today. So can we all please our woman leader for a great job?
Amen.
God bless you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cheers, everybody.
One more toast, please.
Bless you, my
Thank you.
Good job.
For a great job. Thank you. Toast.
God bless you.
Long love,
God bless you.
Jesus' name.
Amen.
Be our portion in
Rose, thank you for
Jesus' name.
Thank you, woman leader. This one. God bless you for all your hard work. Jesus' name.
Amen.
Beep, beep, beep.
Hooray!
Yes, everybody.
Hooray! Beep,
There's
beep, beep.
everybody.
Hooray!
Hey, no music.
She brought music, oh, she promised us music.
Before music, our sister is going to
Yes,
They will not even take it when it's out of
She
that bag
promised us
because they
music.
believe you
She
put
said we're going to
poison in it.
dance.
Yeah,
Amen.
music.
Thank you to Honorable Egobamie. God bless you, Vote sir. of thanks first, please.
Before music, can we do a vote of thanks? Before music, please, we're going to do the vote of thanks. And after the vote of thanks, everybody is going to unmute yourself so that we can say hello to each other. Some of us, we've not seen ourselves for a couple of years because of this pandemic. Some of us, we've seen ourselves. So after the vote of thanks, we're going to unmute everybody so that I can say hello to each other for like 2-3 minutes, then before the music kicks in. Sister Comfort, go ahead with the vote of thanks. Is Sister Comfort here? Ms. Obaso, unmute yourself. I can't hear you.
Mrs. Audu, please unmute yourself and give the vote of thanks for us, please. Mrs. Comfort Audu.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I thank you. So everyone, we thank you once again for hanging in there with us to the very end. We have had a wonderful time today, and I want to start off by just acknowledging the goodness of God, to whom we give ultimate gratitude and thanksgiving for giving us the gift of life, for sustaining our lives through the pandemic and through this almost 2 years of home shutdown. We give thanks to God for his grace and for gracing us with life and bringing us together in this forum through this gift of technology. So glory be to God on high. Amen.
Amen.
God.
Amen.
Wonderful seminar today. Mr. Gobia, we just thank you so much for your distinguished presentation today, which has been both relevant and practical. In spite of the time and technology limitations and constraints, we found your presentation to be expository and comprehensive. It was practical and relevant and easy to use. We found that your presentation shows a lot of knowledge and preparation and passion. And we appreciate how you were so vulnerable as to use your own personal example to help us to understand this issue that touches every life. Everyone in the diaspora, this affects your life to some extent, to a great extent or to a minor extent, but we found the expertise of our presenter, and we just say thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So we say thank you, sir, and everyone echo the thanks to our presenter, Mr. Egobamie. Please say
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Presenter.
And as you can see,
Round of applause. Round of applause.
Thank you for give you a round of applause. This has been wonderful. And as you can see, this hit a personal note that there was a surprising request for the contact information, which has been put in the chat. Everyone's information is on there. So we thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
And we thank you, Mr. Tunde Obaze, for taking the time out today to be with us. By way of interest, you all should know that our moderator and our MC is responsible for such radio productions as African Hour, Empowerment Radio, Point Blank, and Strictly Reggae. He took time away from his very valuable work to be with us today. So, Brother Tunde, we say thank you for your
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we want to thank our woman leader, Mrs. Obasanjo.
Thank you.
Hip, hip, hooray.
Good job. Good job.
Powerful woman of God. Yes.
God bless you.
This is a woman who loves the Lord, and because she loves the Lord, she serves people. So, sister, we thank you for your insight. We thank you for your wisdom. We thank you for your ability to put together.
Your resilience. Thank God for your life.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. So let's give our sister a hand. It's Obasanjo.
Yes.
Hip, hip, hooray.
Hooray.
And I want to thank my co-moderator, Mrs. Bossa Oviesu, for collaborating with we want to celebrate everyone who is here today. ENAW, Edo Women for GO, and every other group, ODA USA members, people who called in from Europe. Hey, Chris Audu. Hey, welcome to our forum.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. From everywhere.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I celebrate you all, and we give thanks to God for your presence. We give thanks to God for the gift of life, for the gift of our speakers, and the gift of technology that we can connect with each other. Ladies, thank you for your time. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Comfort. Thank you so much.
Oh Lord!
Let's go!
How we feel? Number one DJ
Thank you so much.
Oh Lord!